Well, good morning. I think I'm going to start by reading a little bit of the Heart Sutra. Um, for those who are not familiar with the Heart Sutra, uh, um, the Heart Sutra is where the phrase form is emptiness, emptiness is form comes from. Uh, but what I really want to talk about is Avalokiteshvara, who is the one talking, the one teaching the Heart Sutra. This is not a teaching directly from the Buddha. This is quite a bit later, um, but not so much later since it's basically a recording of a conversation between Avalokiteshvara and Shariputra, who was one of the Buddha's senior monks. And Avalokiteshvara is in Buddhist tradition considered an embodiment of compassion. Avalokiteshvara is a name that comes from India. In other countries in Asia, Avalokiteshvara has different names. Chenrezi in Tibet, in East Asia, Kuan Yin, and other names. But the most important aspect of Avalokiteshvara that I want to talk about is compassion. Avalokiteshvara is said to embody what's called Maha Karuna. Karuna is compassion in translated into English. Maha is great. So Avalokiteshvara embodies a compassion that is more transcendent than standard compassion. And that's what I wanted to talk about this morning is the greatest, deepest level of compassion and perhaps how to work with it. So the Heart Sutra starts off and says, Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva, practicing deep prajna paramita, clearly saw that all five skandhas are empty, transforming all suffering and distress. So what does that mean? Right? A lot of translation. So I already explained Avalokiteshvara. Bodhisattva is translates as awakened heart, awakened being. A bodhisattva is one who dedicates their life to supporting and caring for all beings. So Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva practicing deep prajna, that means wisdom. Paramita is kind of one of the Buddhist lists, the paramis. So it's basically saying that Avalokiteshvara is practicing, meditating very deeply in the field of wisdom, of clear seeing, free from delusion, free from the various veils that human beings experience in order to soften the reality that we live in. So Avalokiteshvara, in this wisdom practice, clearly saw. And then it says that all five skandhas, which means all the fabricated experiences that we have, fabricated experiences in the body, in the heart, in the mind, fabricated experiences of action in the world, all our fabricated experiences are empty. We'll get to empty in a bit. Transforming all suffering and distress. And the key word in there is all, not some, all. Transforming all suffering and distress as a result of the deep wisdom that leads to clearly seeing that everything is empty. What is empty? My simple definition of emptiness in the Buddhist context is empty of suffering, of separation. Empty of separation. That in order for us to experience different moods, different mind states, different bodily experiences, different emotions, sensations, sense experiences, they all have to be separated out from the vastness of the field of all experience. You can't appreciate a sunset unless it's separate from the rest of the earth, from the rest of your senses. It has to be discerned separately. You can't be delighted by a kindness that a friend does unless that kindness is separated from all the other experiences you have with people. It has to be discerned as separate. And you fill up with that kindness and you feel good. Or maybe the person does something that's upsetting and you're upset. Maybe you get hurt or angry. And you can't experience that without separateness, without that experience of that person's behavior as being separate from the totality of all experiences that exist. So what is being said here is that Avalokiteshvara, who is the embodiment of great compassion, sees vividly, clearly, as it actually is, that all of these separate experiences are in fact not separate. They're all connected. And that seeing of it as not separate, as all connected, transformed all suffering and distress. So then it goes on to say, now Avalokiteshvara turns to Sariputta and says, form, physicality, is empty. And emptiness, the lack of separation, is experienced in form. That's a difficult one. That's a difficult one to experience our body as not separate. This is why it's called Maha, very great, very deep, very profound. This is an experience that we have to really work quite hard in our practice to actually directly have that experience, that our actual bodies are not separate. They are none other than connected to all physicality that there is. And all physicality is connected to everything. And then Avalokiteshvara goes on and says, Sariputta, all our sensation experience, all our thought experience, all our intentions and actions, all our consciousness, our knowing of everything that occurs is also empty, is also not separate. Sariputta, all things are marked by emptiness, by not separateness. Having even one moment of experience of freedom from separateness transforms all suffering and distress. This is Thich Nhat Hanh's core teaching. His core teaching he phrases it interbeing. Interbeing is simply saying that everything is interconnected. Nothing is separate. And that the experience of acknowledging and directly knowing this interbeing, this quality that everything is, transforms suffering. So this is all wonderful teaching. This is all wonderful teaching. So how do we use this in a practical way? How do we use this in our day-to-day lives? Because we all live in the world. We all interact with the other people, other animals, plants, air, water, rocks. We interact with fields of emotion, with mind states, feeling wide open and receptive, feeling closed down and cranky. These are mind states. We especially are reactive to perception. Our perception of what's going on, our perception of what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we think. We have a sense of our perception as being direct and accurate. This is the perception that we have. This is how we are seeing clearly, right? We see this. We know this. We think this. This is how we value things, is through perception and through experience. And then we encounter another person. And perhaps unfortunately, every single human being, but in this case, every single human being has a unique perception, a unique field of perception, a unique neurological perceptual system. And so it doesn't take more than a moment of interacting to notice that there are an awful lot of people out there who don't perceive things the way I do. And so we assume they're crazy or stupid or blind or they've been sucked in by, some story that is not true because my perception is accurate. Their perception is inaccurate. This obviously comes into play when we pay attention to the news, but really a focus of this might be when we have interactions with people. Maybe interactions with friends, with people at a workplace, with just people around town, and maybe with family members that we're much more intimate with, or partners that we're in relationships with. How do they have perceptions that are different than mine? That's crazy. I can see clearly that this is what's going on right now. How can you see it differently? You're wrong. Either we're saying that to the other person, or at least thinking it, or they're saying or thinking it about us. All of this perception causes suffering and distress because it's separate. Because in order to perceive, we have to separate one thing out from another. Even when you just look at a tree, you can't look at a tree without at the identical moment looking at everything else as not that tree. How does a tree be separate from everything else? By separating it with your perceptual system. And then everyone's perceptual system is unique. So you're standing there with another person and you look at the tree and you make a comment about the tree, and what you're really doing is making a comment about your perceptual system. This is my perception, you say to the other person, but you don't. You say, oh, that tree is, and then you describe it as though that tree was your perception, rather than knowing it's my perception, it's not the tree. And then the other person says, that's not true. What are you seeing? That tree is, and they say something different. If you were able to know that it's perception, then you would both be correct, even though it's completely different. Each of you is perceiving tree, in quotes, in the manner that you're perceiving it. Nobody's making a mistake. Nothing's wrong. It's just you have different perception. Everyone has different perception. And we try our best over the course of our lives to spend as much time as possible with people whose perceptions are at least closer to ours than average. And as little time as possible with people whose perceptions are, oppositional to our perceptions. And we make a really big deal of this. And this causes us a great deal of suffering and distress. Now, I gave a really nice, sort of not very emotional example of looking at a tree. But what if you're with someone at work or a friend out doing something, or especially with someone you live with? Or maybe it's your kid or your parent. And their perception of something that is happening between the two of you is different than yours. And you think they're crazy. They're wrong. They don't understand. They're not seeing clearly. And they think the same of you. And now you're in a conflict. And now the suffering and distress is really significant and really uncomfortable. And then, of course, we then fabricate a story around that. They don't, and wherever you go, they can't, they're not, and they're, of course, doing the same thing. And the more the fabrication gets more connected with other wounds that you've suffered in your life, other pains that you've experienced, yeah, you've really created a nest of snakes that are all, biting you and squeezing you and causing even greater suffering and distress. Maybe even rising up to real anger and hatred with someone you really care about. And it's so unpleasant, you want it not to exist. Maybe at that moment you want the relationship to not exist anymore. You want to go away and get rid of this person. All because their perception of what's going on is different than yours. Which, of course, it has to be. They're not you. They're something else. They're another being. So the antidote to this is when someone expresses through language or body language or anything, when they express that they're experiencing something different than you are. And arising in you is this, almost scorn. How could they? Or hurt. Why are they? You pause and you recognize that I don't know what is leading them to say this. I don't know what experience, what perception is occurring for them. But this I do know. Whatever I am observing, whatever they are doing, is naturally arising from experiences, from history, from the conditions that are existing in that moment. It's natural. That's the key. It's natural. There's nothing wrong with it. There may be work to do in order for you to be able to continue to care for each other. But the idea that they're wrong, or the idea that I'm wrong, is just a form of suffering and distress. Clear seeing is knowing that the content, the stories, the separate, pieces that we're identifying, in order to create a whole story about how this person is hurting you, or how this person is just simply stupid. You have to pick out specifics. They should this. Why aren't they that? What's going on with this thing? All of those are separate pieces of content that we pull from our own experience, from our own perception, from the conditions that we're in that moment, the moods and mind states we're experiencing. They're all misunderstandings. They're all fabrications. They're all the way we make stuff up in order to navigate the world. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's extraordinary that we're able to do this. It's extraordinary that we can make up stories and use them as navigation tools to get through each day, to get through each life. We're really blessed. But with this blessing comes a curse. And the curse is not seeing clearly that these are fabrications. Clinging to these fabrications as though they were, in fact, not just simply signs and markers for us to navigate the world, but as though they were actually real. And not only real, but that we become invested in them. That we believe that certain ones of these fabrications are reality. And then when other people don't, experience our fabrications and experience their own, well, they're wrong. Because I'm invested in this. I believe this. And then at its really deepest, I'm going to say delusional state, our sense of self becomes dependent on a fabrication. Our very sense of who I am, what I'm about, what's important to me, we're so invested in that. It means so much to us that when someone expresses something different, they're not simply expressing a different opinion. They're actually violating my boundaries. They're actually telling me I'm something other than what I have invested my sense of, self into. To unbind from these fabrications Avalokiteshvara is saying you need to let go of separateness, or at least you need to be mindful of it. That's the bottom line. If you're not mindful that this belief, that this sense of what's true is a fabrication made out of my perception of how things are, and that I've been finding it really useful, but it is a fabrication. It's not reality. If we're mindful that that's the case, then when somebody does something that is, in a sense, in opposition to our view, makes our view feel shaky or undermined, instead of getting hurt and angry, instead of feeling betrayed and not seen, we can go, oh, however they're behaving, how they, what they're saying is arising naturally. It's arising naturally as a result of everything they've ever experienced. Because it's not separate, it's connected. What they're doing is connected to all that is, through the field of their ancestors, of their friends and community growing up, of the nature of their genetic structure in their bodies, of the acculturation that they've absorbed. All of this is obviously true, is obviously how each being is formed. Whether it's a blade of grass, a squirrel, or a person, or a puff of air, or a creek. All things are formed by the coming together of an unknowably large number of factors. Even if it's someone that you know very well, a partner, or child, or a parent, and you know their story, you know their history, and you see them do something that is upsetting to you, or um, and you have a story. Oh, they're doing this because. That's still a fabrication. It may have uh, some insight into some of the conditions that led to what they're saying or doing or how they're being in this moment. But there's no possibility you can know the totality of it all. You couldn't possibly know, you know, some event that happened to a close friend of your great great grandmother that impacted your great great grandmother in a certain way, that led everything in a particular direction, and that you are heir to. That you are actually experiencing something, that some energy field that has been drifting through your ancestors for generations. And you try to figure out the content of that. You try to figure out, well, this happened to me and that occurred and this is what's true and this is, and and that's very skillful in some ways, because some of that investigation and exploration and story making, that fabrication, helps guide us through our days and through our lives. But underneath that fabrication is the unknowability. It's too vast to know. You don't actually know. You're just making it up. And I don't say that in a disparaging sense. I think that's skillful to make it up. But when you don't know it's made up, and you think this is the answer, this is the truth, then whenever somebody expresses something that is different or even in opposition of that, you're upset. You're upset because it's the truth. How can you? Why are you? What's this about? It's not the truth. It's a fabrication. You're taking specific, separate details and weaving, fabricating brilliantly. You're doing a great job. But don't forget, don't lose touch with that it's simply a fabrication. It's not what the other person experiences. It's not what they fabricated. What they fabricated, just like what you fabricated, is the result of a myriad of factors that are so vast it's beyond knowing. And there is no time that any experience, whether it's an internal experience, emotional, thought, physical, there is no time those internal experiences are anything but natural. Anything but naturally occurring as a result of what has been. There's nothing wrong. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to fix ourselves. What we need to do is see what's going on and make choices about how to act. What we want to think, what we want to say, what we want to do. These choices have to come from clearly seeing what's being fabricated and what are the resultant sensations in the body, emotions, thoughts, sense experiences. And not thinking there's something wrong with us. Not blaming, not looking for the source that you should blame. Oh, this is why. Or as we look for sources, to know we're just fabricating. And the fabricating that we're doing is quite useful. It helps us navigate. It helps us come up with a way of relieving some of the stress, some of the distress. And that's good, but that's also a fabrication as well. And then to take that freedom from blame and give it as a gift to your interaction with another person, with any being. To let that other person be who they are. Act how they're acting. Say what they're saying. Think what they're thinking. Perceive as they perceive. And to know that in every moment, all of this perception and the actions arising from that perception are natural. They arise naturally as a result of. And you don't have to know the result of what, because it's unknowable anyway. All you're going to do is make up a fabrication about how come they're like that. And if you do make up a fabrication about how come they're like that, well, that makes sense. You know, you need some little signs in order to navigate. So you can get through, you know, maybe a moment of conflict with somebody. You need some signs, you need some story. But underneath the story, you need to know the story is just a fabrication, and that the truth is there's nothing wrong. That you can have faith that the person is not doing what they're doing for anything other than natural causes. And then you have to figure out, you know, how to respond. One way to possibly respond was with curiosity and interest. But the most important way to respond is with compassion. And this is not the compassion of, oh, you poor dear. This is the compassion that Avalokiteshvara is experiencing. Avalokiteshvara is seeing clearly that everything they're saying, everything they're doing, whatever their perception is not separate. It's the result of an infinite number of events, of relations, of experiences, of conditions, so vast that it's unknowable. But without question, it's naturally occurring. And our compassion is sitting in that seat, seeing clearly that whatever it is that is disturbing in the actions of another are natural. That there's no reason to blame. They're not doing anything wrong. No more than, you know, some of the water in a creek going in this direction or that direction. There isn't a right direction for the water in a creek to go. It simply goes naturally as a result of everything that has come before. It goes where it goes. You know, to imagine yourself as a drop of water or an aggregate of a bunch of drops of water turning to your companion aggregate of a bunch of drops of water and saying, no, no, don't go that way. You'll get caught in an eddy. Go this way so we can head down to the ocean. And your companion aggregate of drops of water says to you, no, I want to be in the eddy. I want to like spin around and get to, you know, enjoy this spot for a longer period of time. You're crazy. No, you're crazy. What are you doing? That, no, I need you. You have to go with me and I have to go to the ocean. Yeah, but I want to like stay here for a while. No, yes, no, no. It's like, it's silly what I'm saying. Except it's not, because that's exactly what we do all the time. We hate where other people are going. We think they're crazy. We think they're wrong. We wish they wouldn't. We get hurt and angry. Everything that occurs internally and externally is the natural result of what has come before. You don't have to change much, but it is imperative, if you want to open to the world as it actually is, that you know that your perception and everything that arises in your thinking, in your feeling, in your body, everything that arises is a result of how you're perceiving things. And should not be taken as self, as who I am, as what I am, should not be taken as something that needs to be defended and held. Let the river flow. Let everything be naturally what it is. Make choices that are wholesome and kind, without blame, without hatred. This is what leads to freedom. So let's sit and practice this.